us when he comes.
Awake and ready.
And when he asks us to dedicate ourselves ever more perfectly to him, how will he find us?
Awake and ready.
Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
friend, beloved God,
friend, beloved God,
great Master,
great Master,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
Swami Shri Yukteswar,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
Paramahansa Yogananda,
saints of all religions,
saints of all religions,
with deep love and gratitude,
deep love and
we
gratitude,
bow before you.
we bow before you.
Give us the strength and courage
Give us the strength and courage
to offer ourselves completely to thee.
to offer ourselves completely to thee.
Purify us,
Purify us,
that we may become your channels,
that we may become your channels,
to share your divine love and joy
to share your divine love and joy
in this world.
in this world.
Oh, peace.
Peace.
Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasures, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love. Lord Most High, our Heavenly Father, all our lives we dedicate to Thee. All our labors, all our joys and woes, all our pleasures, all our melody. Make us each a channel of Thy peace. When in darkness, guide us from above. Where there's sorrow, may we sow Thy joy. Where there's hatred, may we share Thy love.
Continue to meditate as you listen to these words on our affirmation for this week, positive thinking. As we think, so we become. And as we think, so our lives and circumstances become also. From the divine consciousness come answers to all our questions and solutions to all our problems. It is in lower consciousness that confusion reigns. Think positively in everything you do, for in that way you help to attune yourself to the divine flow. One who is inwardly in tune with grace finds all things harmonious and beneficial being attracted to him. Positive thinking, combined with the sense of divine attunement, is never presumptuous, for it draws its power not from the ego, but from the consciousness of God's joy within. And let's affirm together in a strong voice, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts.
My outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts,
Filled with the joy of God,
filled with the joy of God.
I express His joy and harmony in everything I do.
I express His joy and harmony in everything I do.
Now in a regular speaking voice, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts.
My outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts.
Filled with the joy of God,
Filled with the joy of God.
I express His joy and harmony in everything I do.
I express His joy and harmony in everything I do.
And in a whisper now, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts.
My outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts.
Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. Now silently, but with the deepest focus, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. Broadcasting it again silently from the spiritual eye, my outer life is a reflection of my inner thoughts. Filled with the joy of God, I express His joy and harmony in everything I do. And pray silently with me. Problems cannot exist, Lord, whenever Thou art near. Give me strength always to hold Thee in my heart. Om. Peace. Amen. Good morning. Welcome to our Sunday service. To those in person and those joining online, my name is Dharmadevi and this is Narayan, and I'm reading to you from Rays of the One Light weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Ananda. This week is Victory Demands the Courage of Conviction. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ said in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 10, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth, that is to say, that clingeth to his life, shall lose it. And he that loseth, in other words, that giveth up his life for my sake, shall find it." God tests the firmness of our faith. The sword described here is the sword of discrimination. The struggle Jesus describes is not a war against unknown enemies, but the struggle with our own attachment to all that is nearest and dearest to us, humanly speaking. Ultimately, it is a war against the ego itself, and against anything with which we surround ourselves to bolster the ego's fragile sense of security. When Yogananda as a boy fled to the Himalayas to embrace a life of solitary meditation, he was apprehended by his older brother Ananda and brought home again. At a certain point, before he would accept defeat, he whispered to his friend Amar, his companion on the flight, "Let us slip away when opportunity offers. We can go on foot to Rishikesh." But Amar, whose brother had accompanied Ananda, had turned pessimist, disclaiming any intention of continuing their adventure. Yogananda's memorable comment on Amar's refusal was, he was enjoying the familial warmth. The spiritual warrior rejects that familial warmth. Rather, he claims the whole universe as his home. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 14th chapter, unaffected by outward joys and sorrows, or by praise and blame, secure in his divine nature, regarding with equal gaze a clod of mud, a stone, and a bar of gold, impartial toward all experiences, whether pleasant or unpleasant, firm-minded, untouched by either praise or blame, treating everyone alike, whether friend or foe, free from the delusion that in anything he does, he is the doer. Such a one has transcended nature's triune qualities. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om. Om. Om.
Good morning, friends. Stop. Stop what you're doing. Thank you. I wanted to share one of Master's Whispers from Eternity. And this one is called Keep the Compass Needle of My Attention Ever Pointed Toward Thee. Whether soaring through the sky, encased in a steel air cage, or drawn o'er the land by snorting iron steeds, or moving easily over smooth highways on rubber wheels, or having my very thoughts paralyzed by the pounding din of assembly lines, the compass needle of my attention will ever keep turning toward thy magnetic North Pole of divine love. Beaten by winds of happenstance, drenched by cloudbursts of misery, sucked down in the mud of soul enmeshing, ego-whipped activity, or wandering lost in jungles of confusion, my mind will yet ever reach out for thy guiding touch. The raft of my life, tossed about helplessly by the driving storms of need, was drifting towards rocks of insatiable desire. O pole star, in our wisdom skies, thy twinkling light beckoned and directed me toward thy shores of eternal contentment. Though countless mechanisms pound, twist, or stretch my anguished nerves, yet will the homing pigeon of my love wing its way peacefully toward its true home in thee. It's so beautiful, and I did get a chuckle when Master said, I don't know if you caught that part where he said smooth roads, rubber tires over smooth roads, and I thought, well, Los Angeles today, our roads are not all that smooth. Our roads have a lot of impediments. And that's what this reading is talking about today. I thought of Master's couplet, that you may have heard it, when thy eye shall die, then shall I know who am I. And that was coming up for me in relation to this topic. Victory demands the courage of our conviction. Christ is giving us these quite powerful words. I came not to bring peace, but a sword. Here he's known as the peacemaker, and he tells his disciples to go in peace, and yet here he's saying, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. What is he talking about? Swami's helping us to understand more deeply, right, that sword is the sword of discrimination, sword of devotion, the sword of unswerving determination to find God and our heartfelt commitment to the divine search. That's what the sword is really about. Because we all know when we come onto the spiritual path, we encounter resistance. Isn't it so? Maybe you have a family. That's why he's bringing up family. It's not that he's trying to break up the family unit. We have a beautiful family with us. That's not what Christ is saying. He's trying to help us to sever our emotional attachment to anything of this world. I remember when I came onto the spiritual path, with my earthly family, it went over like a Led Zeppelin. and I had these very intense conversations with my father. Wasted talent, son. That was a line you wouldn't know it, but those of you who are into the Italian culture, it's actually a line from a movie called The Bronx Tale. A Bronx Tale. Anyway, but I would have these back and forth heated conversations with my father. Wasted talent, son. You're throwing your life away. And at first I would get into it with him and I would react back. But then, through the grace of God and Guru, I heard that talk of Master. You know that one where he said this man came to him and he was arguing with him for over an hour saying, you make money in religion. And Master, rather than arguing with him, said, well, maybe you're right. Maybe you're right. And for like an hour he went, and finally the man gave up. And then actually Master could correct him. But anyway, I took this tact with my father, and he said, you're joining a cult. And I said, well, maybe you're right. You're wasting your talent. And I said, well, maybe you're right. And then finally, he just couldn't get through, so he switched his tactic, and he tried to appeal to my desire to want to help people with, on the spiritual path and sharing. And he said, son, all the sinners are here on the East Coast. And we both actually got a good chuckle out of that. Really what it amounts to, actually, I remember him saying this too one time before I went on a trip. I love you, son, too much. You see, there's that emotional attachment. Even the great masters. Do you remember when Sri Yukteswar met Babaji? And Babaji told him, tell Lahiri the life force is running low and he'll be leaving the body soon. And Sri Yukteswar said that to Lahiri, and it was like a quiver went through Lahiri, and he became completely immobile, unmoving, and silent for 3 hours. And Sri Yukteswar and all the disciples were like, oh my God, what happened to our normal... Lahiri was normally very jubilant and life-giving. And after those 3 hours, he came back. But what was he doing in that time? He was using the sword of discrimination, the sword of devotion, the sword of non-attachment, and saying, my home is not of this world. And that's the greatest love. It's not a cold thing. That's our misinterpretation of this teaching of Christ here. That what he was saying was, I came to wield the sword, and then of course that gets misinterpreted into religions and fundamentalism and all of that. But for us, the important thing as well is we get to a certain point in our spiritual life where we realize that we actually have to offer our very ego into the ocean of God's awareness and bliss. And I don't know about you, but maybe you feel like, how do you do that? How does that work? Because we're swimming in this ocean. We're already in a little, I shouldn't say it's an ocean, it's like a little mud puddle of our own ego. Right? It's like that story Master would often tell of the demon that came and was tormenting this one village, and then the holy man did an incantation and chanted the mantra and threw it on to the demon, and the demon said, ha, I got into your powder before you could even utter your mantra. But Master was using that as an illustration to say we're poisoned with the very disease we're trying to overcome, which is this sense of limitation, separation. That's all the ego is. It's just on a little piece of thought rests the universal lot. Rub that thought away and it drops away. Master used to say, we had this little thought. And when that little I shall die, then shall I know who am I. So how do we overcome it? Really, it's important for us to refresh our memory. Like you push the reset button. If you ever played an arcade game, you start over. Because we get caught, and we get caught because we have a certain identity, a certain set of self-definitions, and we have to ask ourselves, well, who am I? Really? Master called the whole path self-realization. But the inquiry here, it's a spiritual inquiry. We can't look it up. Look at me. I have five books up here. I love books. I love Swamiji. And I always get a lot of quotes and I prepare. And I can't get through them all. It doesn't happen that way. It happens through like St. Francis, it happens through the book of your heart. Do you remember that story of St. Francis when he said to his brothers, what is true joy? And they said, well, I don't know, brother, you tell us what is true joy. He said, well, if we should come walking in winter and we come back to the monastery and the brothers open the doors for us and we feel their warm embrace, that is not true joy. And if they should even have a repast for us, a great meal, and we feel their love through that, that is not true joy. And they said, well, brother, tell us. Francis, tell us, what is true joy? And he said, if we should come and they should throw us out into the snowdrift and mock us and sneer at us, and we still feel that joy of Christ within, oh, that is true joy. Because he's helping us to remember that the joy we are really after is not conditioned. It's not something outside us. It's something that is within. And how do we find it? We have this pickaxe of self-realization, and we make the effort to follow the teachings that our Guru has given us, or whatever path it is that you follow, to follow the advice of the wise ones and what they say. And what they say is, you are not who you think you are. When Master took, that's why I wanted to do this chant, thank you, Dharmadevi, no birth, no death today. Do you remember when Master took his vows of becoming a Swami? And Sri Yukteswar did it in the unceremonious way. He just dipped a piece of silk because he knew Master would go to the West. And he said in the West they'll respect silk more, and usually monks didn't wear silk. But Master just, when he took that vow, he began dancing. And he started this chant of Swami Shankaracharya. That's what he started chanting. Father, mother, have I none. I am he, Blessed Spirit, I am he. When we feel that, that's the true love and joy of God. Because it's a place within our soul that is always there. And that ever knows the truth of who we really are. And miracles will happen in our life. I know that each and every one of you has experienced this in some way, that the more you give of yourself, right? This is the fruit of renunciation. The more you give, that's what Krishna is saying in the other half of this equation. He's saying, what is the fruit? Is essentially what Master said. Praise can't make me any better, nor blame any worse. I am who I am before my conscience and God. Krishna goes on and says more than that. But that's the fruit of it. It's not that you don't care. Of course, the yogis are the most deeply compassionate and loving people. They're actively engaged in the world. But they can do it with a sense of non-attachment, of truly... That's why we were all so drawn to Swamiji, is that he gave, like the sun, equally to all. What is the eyes of the wise man? What Krishna says, he gazes the clod of earth, a bar of gold. It's all the same. There's no difference in the way he acts. He gives equally to all. And in that way, the more that we give, the more he can take our clay of materiality and turn it into the gold of spirit. And I'll close by sharing with you this incredible miracle that happened that I was a witness to recently. We have a friend in the community who lost a friend to COVID. And of course, the man, Enrique was the man's name that passed. And our friend knew him for a number of years, maybe close to 40 years. Worked together, laughed together, and they had shared the journey of life together. And so naturally our friend was grieving when his friend Enrique passed. And so Dharmadevi and I did a small astral ascension ceremony for Enrique with our friend, just the three of us. And at the end of it, we sang Swami's song, Go With Love. Many of you, probably all of you, know that song. Help me out. Go with love, may joyful blessings speed you safely on your way. May God's light expand within you. May we be one in that light someday. And right when we ended the song, we sang that line, there was a pregnant pause. It's just the three of us in the meditation room at the ashram. Nobody else at the ashram. And all of a sudden, from this silence, we hear this chanting. And Dharmadevi tells me I'm a little hard of hearing, so I didn't know if I was just making it up in my own mind. But I thought, well, maybe it's someone pulled up in a car and they have chanting outside. And then I thought, well, maybe Ryan is upstairs and he's playing chanting. And I couldn't place where it was coming from. And then finally we realized there's a little iPod in the meditation temple. And it was on the other side of the room. We weren't even close to it. It had spontaneously turned itself on, and the chant that was playing was Light the Lamp. And the line, once we realized what was happening, the line that we heard was, touch me but once, and I will change all my clay into thy gold. And it was like the soul of Enrique was saying, I am ascending in God. Don't grieve. Give your love to me in this spirit of non-attachment, and the true love and joy of God will be with you always.